What's up, everybody? Welcome to Exposing Lies in Modern Science Curriculum, Part 4. We're going to be looking at this freshman general science textbook tonight. I'm going to reduce the calculated attempts of society to teach children, high schoolers, the whole public school system, basically, and all the universities are teaching their students that they share common heritage with an earthworm, that they went from jellyfish to fishermen, literally. That is the theory. So they scoff at us for saying that it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and then in their peer-reviewed journal it says it rained for 2 million years. So it's really bad for them. Okay, you can't even make a comparison. They are the ones with the problem, not us. We believe that all the animals came from an ark, and they believe that they all came from a rock. It's totally absurd. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and be prepared for mind-bending debates and head-spinning controversy just like this. Don't go away. I'll be with you momentarily. All right, so we're looking at General Life Science, 6th grade, Rogers County 2020 edition. Okay, got the whole collection right over there. But we're going to start out on page 19. So I'll bring that up for you on the screen right now. Page 19, where does life come from? You've probably seen a fish tank. We're going to skip down here. The idea that living things come from non-living things is known as spontaneous generation. This idea became a theory that was accepted for several hundred years. And then it says down here that it was not until the mid-1800s that the work of Louis Pasteur, a French chemist, provided enough evidence to disprove the theory of spontaneous generation. It's replaced with biogenesis, which is the theory that living things come only from other living things. So over 100 years, literally, it's been disproven, and it stood the test of time. No one has been able to spontaneously generate anything. Like nobody has ever seen life come from non-life, and not even a chemist has been able to do this, like himself, like trying to do it. So not only has that never happened in nature, like the Yellowstone, they have like hot springs over there. This is literally never happened. Let me have some notes somewhere. All right, so for over 100 years, it's never been verified that life comes from non-life. Modern cell theory actually solidifies this phenomenon as something that has stood the test of time. I mean, that's what science is, right? It's got to be repeatable, experimentable, and then it's got to be able to stand the test of time. So, like future generations of scientists, they're not. It needs to be that they will not be able to disprove your theory in the future. Like when they attempt it, it can't be disproven, or at least generally, this is not what happens, And so that's what we had seen for over 100 years. It's pretty ridiculous, and then you have modern cell theory, which teaches that cells come from pre-existing cells. The next page talks about the Miller-Urey experiment. Let me go there with you. Page 21. Using gases and conditions that Oparin described, American scientists Miller and Urey set up an experiment to test Oparin's hypothesis. It says that Urey's experiment showed chemicals found in living things could be produced. It did not prove that life began this way. Although questions about spontaneous generations have been answered, some scientists are still investigating ideas about life's origins. So even though it's been settled, even in the advances of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, it's all been settled, it can't happen. There's still some people trying to investigate it. Still some people trying to prove it. I mean, hey, go for it. But I can guarantee you that life can only come from God. That's just one man's opinion. But the only person that can create life is God. There's a claim. I made it. That's a prediction, and it will come to pass. Okay, this world will end before somebody creates life in a laboratory. Mark my words. But anyways, that's just one man's opinion there. I'm just saying, it's been a long time. And, the Miller-Urey experiment converted non-organic chemicals into non-living organic compounds. So you got these chemicals, they're not alive, they're not the ingredients for life, they can't make life. But they made it to where you could get non-living organic compounds out of those chemicals. So the chemicals in themselves contain, nothing that's needed for life. But you can heat them up and ignite them with lightning bolts and stuff, zap them and microwave them, whatever you got to do, And they will eventually, if you do it right, they're trying to simulate what the Earth was like millions of years ago when it was a molten state. So you have this chemical soup, and it's non-living. They're totally non-organic compounds, and then they just simply converted them into organic compounds. So sort of like taking a frog and putting it in a blender. You have now all the ingredients for life, but it's just the individual ingredients now. You have to put them all together in the right order to get the frog back. Even if you did it with like an egg, like a yolk, once you break an egg, you're not going to construct that back together. If you take a single cell, the most primitive bacteria we know, more complex than a space shuttle, and you just squish it, crumble it all up, well, then you're not going to be able to put it back together. No way. We're nowhere close to being able to like reconstruct a cell had we taken it apart. This is, we're not on the same level, not even close to nature. So you just have the ingredients for life. You just have like basic amino acids that are necessary to build proteins, which are necessary to come together and build these other things. Just many thousands of things. It's like an entire city going on in there, and all has to come together. Now, like I said, Yellowstone Hot Springs contains natural, non-living organic compounds, just like they were able to produce many times over what they were able to produce just laying there, in that pool, that hot spring. If you've ever seen it on National Geographic or something, it's like a rainbow colored pond, and it has organic compounds in there, but they're not proteins. Okay. They're just the ingredients to like build proteins and stuff, but nowhere in nature are these non-living organic compounds assembling themselves. Nowhere in the laboratory is this happening. Nowhere. So I would say that things like transhumanism, trying to get us above the level of what we already are, like advance certain creatures and plants just by technology, it would never be able to happen. You'd have to be able to get to the point where you can actually build the machine. Like if it comes to pass that somebody can build a rabbit from scratch, some scientist, be pretty amazing. Then he would be able to advance the rabbit into something that is better than what the rabbit already is, or the human, for instance. You'd have to already be able to know how to build it. Nowhere close to being able to know how to construct even the simplest cell that there is. So life on Earth was created immortal and is now cursed. Okay, that was a result of a global flood, destroyed the atmosphere, and so we suffer as a consequence from that. God cursed the ground as he prophesied to, Adam. And then it was prophesied in the days of Noah that Noah would be the one to comfort civilization because of the ground the Lord has cursed. That's another topic. I'm just saying that life on Earth was cursed. Okay, so you can't get to the point where you can just heal all manner of diseases and it's like we have everything figured out. Medicinal technology will not advance to the point where we can just cure anything that we see. We can just prolong life to over 1,000 years or something ridiculous. It'll never get to that point. There are limitations because God has cursed humanity. He's cursed this entire planet. Something that was immortal is now under a curse. So you're not going to be able to get it back to the 100%. It's under a curse. It was created, and the only thing that created is God. So you scoff all you want. The Bible says that there would be scoffers in the last days. Well, you keep scoffing, and we'll see how that works out for you on Judgment Day. It's going to hurt really bad. But anyways, I don't want that for you. You can just come to Christ right now, believe in the creation. I mean, come on. But let's go on to, we're moving on to the next page. Here we go. Oh, I got someone in the private chat and someone in the comments section. So we're just going to hold off on this next page real quick. Let me check out what's going on here. You got Chris Lucas in here, and then Blood Always Finds Its Level. Can't hear you. I hope you can hear me. That's not good. Let me see. saying you can't hear, so making sure that I can hear myself. No, we're good. It maybe just be your audio. I don't know. I apologize if there's something going on with the audio. But Chris Lucas, Blood Always Find Its Level. Nice to have you guys here. I like that stream you was doing the other night, Lucas. And yeah, I sent you an email, so I haven't even checked my emails recently. I don't know if you responded or not, but anyways, thanks for coming on here, man. World X, the EXO. The EXO, I don't know. It says there's no volume in the stream. Can't hear you. Well, I don't know. I just checked it. There definitely is volume in the stream. We're moving on to the next page. Here we go. Page 157. Darwin's observations led many other scientists who conduct experiments on inherited characteristics. Natural selection means that organisms with traits best suited to their environment are more likely to survive and reproduce. That's not the right page, actually. Yeah, that's the right page there. We're actually on 21. Page 21 is actually there. We have not left the origin of life. So if living things can come only from other living things, how did life on Earth begin? Some scientists hypothesized 5 billion years ago, Earth's solar system was a whirling mass of gas and dust. They hypothesized the sun and planets were formed from this mass, and it's estimated that 4.6 billion years ago, the Earth was formed from it. Rocks found in Australia are more than 3 billion years old, contain fossils of once living organisms. Wow. Where am I at here? I'll look at my notes. Modern stellar and planetary formation theories suggest Earth was once a lifeless, molten rock, which had to slowly cool and accumulate water over deep time. So that's why they're saying that it had to, life had to come from non-life, even though there's no way that we can experiment it. It's never been done. You got millions of years and unknown processes. Who knows what could have happened is what they're saying. And if they're assuming that life evolved, or that Earth itself started out lifeless, like a molten state, slowly cooled, started accumulating water, and started growing grass somehow, I don't know. But that had to happen if the Earth was originally lifeless. But unknown processes in deep time remains as the great consensus of the general consensus, rather, of the scientific community, despite the fact that intelligent design is the only verifiable hypothesis that there is. They don't even have a legitimate theory for it that they actually consider a theory. It's all hypothesis. And the only one that is, repeatable, demonstrable, intelligent design. That's the only one, and so that makes it the only verifiable hypothesis. It's the only legitimate theory that there is, but it's not accepted by the general scientific community here. This is the way they think. They're thinking we have differing views on how it happened, but we know that it did happen according to them. But according to what scientific basis is that? Call that science, call themselves scientists, and then believe that life spontaneously generated. You have got to be kidding me. Intelligent design should be the only legitimate theory that is available right now. That's what they should be publishing, because that's the truth. It's the damn truth. I don't care what you say. Let's move on. Yep. Now we're going to Darwin. And this is on page 157. So natural selection means that organisms with traits best suited to their environment are more likely to survive and reproduce. Their traits are passed to more offspring. All living organisms produce more offspring than survive. Uh, the principle describes how natural selection works. So which is what they're describing here with the finches. So I guess I'll describe really quickly what's happening with the birds. Some birds, you got to start out with a group of birds on this island, and then they don't have the right beak to get at the nut. They get that nut, they got to crack it to get at the food that's in it, and they can't do it because of their beak. So naturally, birds produce like a variety of birds. Your offspring looks slightly different. So with descent, with modification over many generations, these beaks end up like mutating and becoming sharper, longer, whatever its need, shorter and stubbier in order to crack that nut. And so nature, is like providing these nuts, and these birds that don't have the right beak, they can't survive because they don't have the right beak. So if you just look at the change of the beaks in the finches according to their fuzzy logic, you can just imagine how they evolved from something that wasn't even a bird. Like those slight major changes, if you just give it millions of years, it's supposed to be able to produce these major changes. But natural selection, it's a changing environment which reduces a structure, like on a creature, which is no longer necessary for survival, and it mutates it into something that is. So like in whale evolution, for instance, it's a guided process in the sense that a land roaming four-legged animal, which is what they say evolved into the whale, this land roaming four-legged animal is forced into an aquatic lifestyle, and this is an animal that slowly went extinct, and as it went extinct, the small populations, they somehow evolved into the whale. But the point is that the land roaming animal is forced into the aquatic lifestyle, and so they're the future offsprings of that animal are just going to die because they can't live in an aquatic environment unless by chance, they evolve some new features which require, deep time. So long ago and far away, there's a four-legged animal evolved into a whale because, nature brought on too much water and they needed to have these, the whale equipment to survive in the water. So they just randomly evolved into it. And that literally is, what the theory teaches. But the unguided blind chance of it is that random gene shuffling causes beneficial errors in the genes to mutate certain structures, and this morphs them to suit the environment, just like the beak on the finch. It's just random shuffling of the genes and it mutates. It's technically errors, but it works out for the finch to have an excessively long beak or whatever. Same with any other animal, like a dog with too much hair or what have you. But that happens randomly, that gene shuffling. So how is all of that random gene shuffling going on in the cells just by chance evolving all the necessary equipment to produce a whale from a four-legged animal? That is not even rational at all. So let's go to the next page. Page 165. You have determining a fossil's age using relative dating and radiometric dating. It says relative dating is based on the idea that in undisturbed areas, young rock layers are deposited on top of older rock layers. So the bottom layers of geologic strata are going to be older than the top ones. The top ones are recently laid down because we know that the bottom ones were laid down first. So it's a consecutive buildup of these different layers. So the bottom ones are going to be older than the top ones. It says, for example, suppose a 50 million year old rock lies below a fossil and a 35 million year old rock lies above it. According to relative dating, the fossil is between 35 and 50 million years old. But the question really here is how do they know 35 and 55 million? So in relative dating, you have the bottom layer of strata with the fossils they contain, and they're going to be older than the top fossils. They're just going to assume that based on the fact that, they're, primitive single cells at the bottom, land-dwelling creatures at the top. These ecosystems are increasing with complexity as you get above altitude, which is the same for animals today, and we'll get into that in a minute. But the relative dating says that you have older layers and older fossils on the bottom and younger fossils and younger layers at the top. Absolute dating is where you use radioactivity. And you can look, you can estimate, it's been measured, the amount of radioactive elements that are present, deep within the crust of the earth and then towards the surface. So by and large, you have high levels of radioactivity at the bottom and low levels at the top. And that works out to where you have like short-lived half-lives. And that's how they measure them. You have basically low levels of radioactivity. That's why you use like potassium argon or rubidium strontium, and you're coming up with, ranging from 100 to 200 million years old. Whereas if you was using uranium and lead, be getting a much greater age because it's a high level of radioactivity. It has a higher half-life. 100% of the uranium is assumed, and if you measure 35% of the uranium, then you know how long it's taken for all of that uranium to naturally decay radioactively. But the point is, you have high levels of radioactivity at the bottom, low levels at the top, and you can assume that that means that these are older because of the decay. Or you could look at the hydroplate theory. You can go to the Brian Nichol YouTube channel and look at the video on the origin of Earth's radioactivity, which he got from the hydroplate theory, and that's a theory constructed by Walt Brown, has a PhD in engineering. It's in his book, In the Beginnings. You check that out. Go to the Brian Nichol YouTube channel. If you take 10 samples of a single rock layer and you sent it to 10 different laboratories, they would not be able to yield consistent results. It's just a fact. They're going to come up with, if you didn't tell them like on a chart, and they require you to fill out a chart before you get something dated. But if you were to just leave out the part about where it came from, they would all get back different results. They, in fact, took, samples of rock layers that they knew were less than 100 years old from Mount St. Helens. They were formed from a volcanic ash or mud flow, years later after the volcano erupted. There was like a mud flow, created all these layers, and they had turned to stone. So you take those rock samples from those layers, and then you send them to 10 different laboratories, and they all come back with 10 different results. Each laboratory, will actually yield 2 or 3 different results, having 2 or 3 different ages, and they have to be selected. Now, we know that because of the fact that they're getting this huge range of results. So how do they know where to put it? They get multiple results. How do they know which one to select? But that's how science is supposed to work. You're supposed to be able to send it to the laboratory, and there's different laboratories. They have the same rock samples from the same strata, and then they're supposed to get the same result if that's how the process works. But actually, they all get different results, and that was done by the RATE team. Okay, research for the age of the Earth. You can look that at RATE team, and they actually experimented with this. Took 10 samples of a single rock, basically, and they sent them to 10 different laboratories, or maybe not 10, but 2 or 3 of them, and they all got different results. Each lab got 3 or 4 different results with 3 or 4 different ages. Old rocks and young rocks persist in both bottom and top layers. Anyway, so if you have high levels of radioactivity generally, in uranium and lead present in the deep portions of the Earth's crust and in the mantle, and then you have lower levels of radioactivity which are present in other radioactive elements, rubidium, strontium, potassium, argon, and then so let me get back on track here. In the top layers, you can actually find like uranium and lead. Uranium is pretty abundant relatively, so you can find it in any of the layers. And then the stuff that's on top, you can also find on the bottom layers. So it's all mixed up, even though generally there's a lot of low-level radioactive elements up here and high-level down here. You still have the the heavy elements and the lighter elements it's all mixed together. So that's why you're coming in the laboratory. They're coming back. They're getting multiple results because of that mixing, and so they choose the one that fits their geologic column because that's the best one to choose. It's kind of based on clues. It's kind of a forensic case because you don't know for sure. The process itself is based on several assumptions, which I don't really want to get into, but it says a radioactive element gives off a steady amount of radiation as it slowly changes to a non-radioactive element. Just go to the Brian Nickel YouTube channel if you want to learn more about the origin of Earth's radioactivity, because you have a certain, it does decay. You take a parent element, you assume it started out at 100%, and it does decay at a certain rate. So if you're measuring a sample of rock and it has 80% uranium, these atoms are 80% uranium, then if you assume that it was at 100 and now it's at 80, well then 20%, let's say, or one half-life, which is 50%, and you know that it takes 1 billion years, let's say, then you know that 1 billion years has elapsed. But that's based on assumptions. So, and we won't get into that. But assumptions, basically, it's decayed at the same rate. And it could be that it has not. You just have to open your mind to alternative theories. Let me see what's going on in the comment section. Yeah, sound is okay. All right, thanks for that, Chris Lucas. Let's move on to the next page. So this is the geologic column, and that's on page 166. Animals and plants alive today are generally in the same order as presented in this geologic column. So you have fish on the bottom, amphibian, reptile, mammal. This is kind of in reverse, but you have, the single cells up there at the origin, 4.5 billion years, and then down at the bottom, the mammals, the humans. So you look at the Earth, the low layers are going to have these primitive cells, and the top layers would be the Quaternary period represented there. From fish to amphibian, reptile, mammal, that's how they believe that they evolved, in that order. But if you look at, animals and plants today, they're generally in that order. So if you were to, say, catastrophically bury them with a global flood, they'd probably end up that way. Each ecosystem or habitat would represent localized floods and mass extinctions that quickly and deeply buried the plants and animals in soft mud or volcanic ash that preserved a graveyard of remains before they could decay. So, according to them, the reason that you have these major groups of animals fossilized is because they experienced these localized catastrophes. So, they went through these mass extinctions in the process of evolving all. So, they view it as localized floods when it really just makes more sense because it's on a global scale. You have sequences of strata that stretch out across multiple continents. The same with fossil uh, remains. They may not be all there together, but patches of different graveyards, that stretch across multiple continents are present, and that speaks to a global process. There's clams on Mount Everest, that are in the closed position. And when the clams die, they open. So they were buried alive. And Mount Everest was quite a ways from the beach. Okay. And the only way that you can get clams on Mount Everest, the whole world was covered in water. It's as simple as that. Mount Everest actually wasn't even there before the flood. It was formed as a result of the flood. And that's another process you could get more on. You check out that book In the Beginning by Walt Brown. But whales and diatomaceous earth have been found. Diatomaceous earth, if it would happen at today's current rates, the rate at which these microorganisms die and fall to the bottom of the seafloor, they're found in the fossil record. Whales that are covered in this stuff. So there's no way that a whale can just sit there for hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years as these little organisms die and fall and slowly bury the whale. They had to be catastrophically placed there. Polystrata trees that connect multiple layers. Some of them are upside down, so you couldn't say that it was just, standing there for millions of years as strata deposited onto it, or that it was growing in the opposite direction, looking for sunlight. Can't say either one of those things because some of them are just upside down. So it indicates a rapid, catastrophic burial of trees, into soft mud or ash or what have you, and then that mud later solidified instead of the tree. Some of them are running through multiple layers of coal. And so coal itself is evidence of a flood. It's evidence of a massive ecosystem, that was, that condensed into one area, and then excessive rock and dirt above it squeezed it, and so much heat and pressure was added that it converted it into coal, which if it was a slow process of this sediment above it, all that vegetation would just rot away, especially over millions of years. But it's more rational, it's more logical to assume that it was there catastrophically, especially if you have a tree connecting them. You can't get, that's just illogical that I don't even want to try to justify that and try to look at that critically, because there's no point. If there's a tree connecting multiple layers, that it was placed into those layers before they had time to solidify, and it couldn't have stood there for millions of years. Some of them are upside down. It's an obvious flood, which that is what the theory is for the polystrata trees among the mainstream science, because you can research this, and there are secular perspectives on this which say that the trees are there because of localized floods. So it's the same with the fossils, just localized extinctions which are doing all of this. If you look at oil, that's another example of what they would consider a localized extinction, because oil is just condensed marine life, fishes and all the microscopic organisms and everything that's in the sea just condensed together. And the heat and the pressure of all the overlaying sediment, it converts it into oil, which if it's a slow process, it would take millions of years. But you can make oil, you can make coal in the laboratory in like 10 minutes. So using turkey guts or whatnot, and then coal, obviously, within an hour at least, you can make some coal, at least the beginning stages of coal, very quickly and rapidly under the right conditions, which a global flood would obviously provide. There are folded mountains in the world. The strata itself has been folded. And they say that's because, you know, millions of years ago, they were under a lot of sediment and a lot of rock, which squeezed it to the point as it slowly rose and buckled under the earth, that there wasn't any cracks or crevices. Because a solid rock, when it bends, it's going to create cracks, and it's going to be obvious fractures and fissures in the rock. If you see a rock that is bent, if you see a rock layer that is bent, it should have all kinds of fractures and fissures. And if it doesn't, that means that the sediment had to be soft at the time that it was folded, or that there was so much overlaying pressure that it could slowly uh, fold like that. But that would require, deep time, require millions of years, when most of the ways that you can even calculate an age of the Earth give you an age of less than 10,000. But we won't get into the details on the age of the Earth. But folded mountains in themselves are just a great indicator that the material was soft, and that uh, those um, those layers themselves were formed rapidly. Uh, you can't really use the idea that over millions of years it slowly rose as all of the pressure and stuff was enough to, squeeze the sediment down to where it didn't fracture or fissure. It was partially like in a molten state, perhaps. You can't really have that because the erosion rates of the continents, of the mountains, is faster than what they are depositing. So if you take the rate at which sediment is deposited, or, you know, the continents are uplifting or moving, you take the rate at which, the land rises, because they're saying that over millions of years, it all used to be underwater and slowly rose above sea level and separated into continental plates and all that. So you just take the rate at which the continents erode and then compare that to the rate at which they build. And you'll see that the erosion rate is much faster. So I think that really cancels out any idea that the folded strata could be formed by a process of, millions of years of tectonic uplift, as there was tons of sediment above, and then over millions of years that was eroded, and now that folded strata is exposed. What was under is now up top because of millions of years of erosion. But that process isn't really possible. You can't have all that overlaying sediment squeezing on the fraction fissures if um, millions of years are going by, eroding all of that at a faster rate at which it can rise. It's clear. Uh, it defeats, devastates that theory, I would say. But those are some examples of this geologic column being a total work of fiction. Total work of fiction didn't happen. Um, Actually, doesn't even exist anywhere except the textbooks. But we won't get into that, not in complete form, at least. So, primitive to most complex. Let's see, I got. Um, yeah, animals and plants, like I said, that are alive today are generally in that order. The complexity rises, in your altitude above sea level. The higher on land you get, the more complex the creatures are. The fish live at the bottom, the amphibians live near the shore, the reptiles, the mammals are up top, the birds, obviously, they're in the air, so they're going to be at the top layers of the strata. So are the humans and the monkeys. They can all climb trees and get to the high spots. So based on various things, the animals are in their order, but basically it's just ecosystems that were there at the time of the flood that were catastrophically buried by a global flood. That is what the geologic column represents. Let's go to the next page. Page 167. Similarities in the embryos of fish, chickens, and rabbits show evidence of evolution. The theory was ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, which is basically teaching that evolution is repeated in the reproduction process of humans and other advanced life forms. So in the different stages of developments, you start out as a fish and you evolve to an amphibian, a reptile, a mammal, and that's what he claimed is happening even in the human embryo. Haeckel faked the drawings of different embryos of various creatures in similar stages of development to make them look more similar than they really are, and he also said that the folds of skin under the embryonic chin are gill slits. So you see here, page 167, the pharyngeal pouches, these folds of skin under the chin, which he believed to be gill slits, so you could prove that it was a fish if that were true, but in reality, they're just various glands, that they develop into glands. These folds of skin develop into glands that are for the eyes, ears, nose, and throat, and they never have anything to do with breathing, just like people today that have multiple chins. They don't breathe through any of them except the top. So that's completely ridiculous, and he was accused of fraud by his own university for faking those drawings. So in reality, each different embryo is unique, among most creatures. These embryos in similar stages of development, they're actually going to be strikingly unique. If you were to see them, and we have examined them, they're real ones, and then compared them to Haeckel's, and they are fake. There are no gill slits. Those are actually used for glands, like I said. So those drawings were fake, and those are not gill slits. On the next page, some more evidence for evolution theory. It says homologous structures. Body parts that are similar in origin and structure are called homologous. They can be similar in function. They often indicate two or more species share common ancestors. But homologous structure is a more rational and logical conclusion, I would think, is that they came from a common designer, the same designer using similar parts for different functions. Homologous structures actually debunk common ancestry, though, because if George Washington has similarities with a rock, is that reasonable to conclude that we derived from one? If we have similarities with a plant, does that mean we came, we evolved from the same thing that a plant evolved from? If Mount Rushmore could not form naturally, how could the men themselves? They believe that there's no way that exfoliation of the rock or erosion or weathering could just slowly carve out that rock over, Mount Rushmore over millions of years and form those faces. There's no way possible. So why would you think the actual people could evolve from a rock? Because that's what they teach. The Earth started out as a molten state. Over millions of years, it slowly cooled the rocks. It rained and then turned them into soup. The soup came alive, in a primitive cell, and then evolved into all the diversity of life that we see today. So they literally teach we came from a rock, that the presidents on Mount Rushmore originally evolved from a rock. And so the same chemicals, some of them that can be found in a rock, are also found in George Washington, and that means that he must have came from the rock. That is their ridiculous logic. You can look at a simple parking lot test. You go to a parking lot and see a bunch of cars, that they came from a similar factory. If you seen a bunch of tanks, you'd know they came from a tank factory, or submarines. You'd know that they came from some sort of a submarine factory. If you can exchange the lug nuts of a Pontiac with a Chevy, that doesn't mean they came from a skateboard. The similarities between Microsoft PowerPoint and Microsoft Word do not show that they evolved from Morse code 3 billion years ago. But that is the irrational logic that they use to justify their insane theories. And then it says also on this page, pull that back up, vestigial structures, the bodies of some organisms that don't seem to have a function. They provide evidence for evolution, it says. They hypothesize vestigial structures like those shown are body parts that once functioned in an ancestor. Vestigial structures are basically reduced or devolved body parts that were advanced and useful in the past, but are no longer necessary. So, for instance, there's some pelvic bones that you can find on the whale, and they believe that those are reduced hind legs from when the whale used to walk around on land. But it's known that those structures, are used for making baby whales. So it never has anything to do with the whale walking around on land. That's ridiculous. You can imagine it if you will, but I really can't. There is a snake, the anaconda, that has two horns, basically in that same like pelvic region if a snake has one, but the lower section of its body has these little horns on it, and they believe those horns are also reduced hind legs from when the snake was walking around on land. If you can imagine that. I mean, I've tried, but I can't, but they believe this. And the actual truth is that the process called macroevolution is not even possible to make this happen. You have to have major changes in the structure and DNA of an animal in order to even reduce a actual leg into a horn that is used for mating, by the way, in anacondas. It never has anything to do with getting the snake to walk around. It's used for grabbing a hold of the snake's mate so you can latch on and get reproduction going. Okay, it can't say, hey, scoot over. But it's a snake. It doesn't have any arms or legs to make this happen. It has those little horns, though, which they didn't come from legs. That's not rational to conclude that, because there's no process today where you can get a major change. You have microevolution, which is like we discussed earlier with the beaks. You get a bigger beak, shorter beak, you get longer hair, shorter hair. You will always get a dog, though, and you will never get a dog as small as a flea or as big as a house, because the genetic information is simply not available. If nature suddenly kills out all of the dogs, those dogs are not evolved into something else because the information is not there. If the information was already there to give it some kind of a trait, which could suit its, changing environment, then yeah, but that's not going to change the animal itself. Will not change the animal. So if macroevolution is not possible, like in the laboratory, if all these different kinds of species of chickens and frogs and just what have you, but they're all fixed to a specific kind, it's obvious that you can't change, you can't put bacteria in a laboratory, reproduce them, which they, you can have one kid every hour or something, or however many kids that they have at one time. The reproduction rate is incredibly fast. And so you can do what would take nature millions of years in a laboratory over the course of maybe 100 years, several different scientists doing the same experiment, which has happened, and none of them have produced anything other than a bacteria. Fruit flies refuse to become anything other than fruit flies in any human experiment ever devised. And that will stand the test of time, that cows will always produce cows. So if you're going to say that vestigial structures are like these devolved body parts that the snake used to walk around and now it just has these little horns, you'd have to be able to demonstrate it in a laboratory, and it can't be done. You have to have an unknown process in millions of years, and that's called a rescue device, a magical ingredient that has nothing to do with science, which is supposed to mean to test, observe, and demonstrate. You can't do that with this stuff. Let's see. Go to the next page. Yep, I think that's the next page. Let me make sure. 169, gorillas have DNA and proteins that are similar to humans and other primates. Oh my, I haven't done open up a can of worms here. So let's try to break this one down. Humans have similarities with primates, therefore they are the same kind of animal. That's what they're teaching. They classify the human as a primate in the textbook. Just because they can find similarities, it classifies as the same animal. I mean, if something has 4 wheels, does that make it, an automobile? I mean, are you kidding me? It could be a pair of roller skates. It could be a skateboard, for crying out loud. Just because it has 4 wheels, that doesn't make it the same thing. A primate, an ape is a lot different than human. But you have a thing called propaganda, which is the omission of critical information that could devastate a particular viewpoint. And you do this, you omit this information, you hide this information from mainstream, media outlets in order to maintain a desired status quo. So, freedom of the press is robbed by much money and political powers. And so in order to maintain their status quo, their main viewpoints that they're marketing and they're making their money off of, they have to omit certain information that may do harm to the theory. So what they're going to do is they're going to tell you about the similarities between the humans and the apes, but they're not going to talk about the major differences. So let me give you an example of how you could brainwash somebody. It's pretty easy too. It's not like I'm some kind of cult of personality and I know how to brainwash, but it's pretty simple. It's not like, I don't know. Some people don't know about it. So hopefully you don't know about it so that this little experiment I'm about to do works out. Here we go. There was a man who left home jogging. He jogged for a while, turned left, and then he jogged for a while, and then he turned left, and then he jogged for a little while more, and then he turned left, and then when he got home, there was 2 masked men waiting for him. So why did he leave home, and who were the masked men? If you don't know this, that's good. That's good, because I'm going to tell you one more time, and you're going to get another guess. There was a man, and he left home jogging. And he jogged a little ways and turned left. And he jogged a little ways and turned left. And he kept jogging a little ways more, and he turned left. And when he got home, there was 2 masked men waiting for him. Who was this? Why did he leave his house? Why did he leave his house? That's number 1. Why did he leave his home? I should say. Why did he leave his home? And who were the masked men? Well, if you don't know that, then you just have to picture a baseball field, okay, and the umpires sitting there. So now you know why he left home and who the masked men were. But because you were probably thinking of like a neighborhood house and like some robbers that were there, but you didn't know for sure if they were robbers or whatever, who they were, you didn't know why he left home, you didn't know who those men were. But when you picture a baseball field, once you get to picture the whole picture, then you know the answer. And so all you have to do if you want to start a propaganda machine is find as many ways as you can to push one viewpoint and reduce the information coming through that would contradict it. And it's as simple as that. If you hide the image of the baseball field, then you'll never be able to figure that out. There's a story in the Bible about how Samson, gave a parable to the Philistines, said, I'll give you like 30 changes of raiment if you can tell me this parable. And, the parable was out of the strong, out of the eater, something sweet, or something. Oh, man, I'm gonna butcher that, so probably I have to look it up in order to tell that right. But the answer to the parable, which is lion and honey. He had found a lion slain that had like some honey growing in its womb or something. He ate it, and it had a relation to that. And the answer to the parable was based on that information that is in his own head. So they can't answer his parable because he's the only one that's going to be able to figure out, or anybody that he told, is the point of that story. So it's a great story. Samson and the parable with the Philistines is amazing. So definitely check that out if you haven't read the story of Samson. That's going to be found in the book of Judges. But anyways, that's how brainwashing works. Okay, it's pretty easy to get brainwashed. Just don't publish any information that could devastate your theory. Top 3 similarities. So my job is now to actually give you the information that devastates the theory of evolution, because this garbage textbook 2020 edition of Rogers County, it's going to teach you that the similarities between apes and humans proves that there's the same animal. That's why we're classified as the same animal. Wow. So they're going to reduce the information that's going to devastate their theory. What they're not going to do in this textbook is tell you about how different we are. So that's my job. Top 3 similarities is what they show, though, in this textbook, which is on this page right here, I believe. 160. No, page 170 says, humans, monkeys, and apes belong to the group of mammals known as primates. So all primates, it says, have opposable thumbs, binocular vision, and flexible shoulders that allow arms to rotate. And these characteristics indicate all primates may have evolved from a common ancestor. So what the textbook teaches, they're saying that we evolved from a monkey, basically. I'm not making this up. You can't make this up. It's crazy. But they say that the similarities that prove this is opposable thumbs, binocular vision, and rotating shoulders. Okay. Well, now I'm going to give you the information that they don't want to give the freshman high schoolers, okay? A freshman lawyer would just tear this to pieces if it was presented in an honest court of law. But top 3 differences is what I'm going to give you. The nervous system, the reproductive system, and the vocal cords are entirely different. There's no way that they could evolve because macroevolution is impossible. So how can you justify ape to man evolution or put them in the same category as the same animal? Because that is insane. They're obviously not the same animal. There are huge differences which are just overlooked. They're just swept under the rug by billions of dollars in propaganda with National Geographic and Discovery Channel. I wish the producers would just put a bullet in their heads right now, because those are reprobate psychopaths that have no business teaching America about what science is. They need to get an honest job picking peaches, changing tires, or delivering pizzas. They are not qualified. If they believe this crazy theory, they have no business. Nobody has any business teaching a student about science if that's what they believe, because that is way, way far away from science. Natural selection can guide creatures to extinction, but genetics must randomly evolve the complex survival features. If you're going to say the ape evolved into the human, well, give me a process by which how that works. Because if the changing environment is going to kill all of the apes, and then the only ones that are going to be able to adapt to that environment are the ones that have specific mutations, just random shuffling of the genes, these errors that turn out beneficial, that has to randomly, by chance, evolve the ape nervous system into a human nervous system. Way different. It's got to evolve the vocal cords. It's got to evolve the reproductive process randomly. A blind chance does this, as all of the other apes die out over millions of years of extinction. These apes are just randomly evolving all of this stuff. Why would that happen? That is totally unguided and random processes of genes in your body, the reproductive system shuffling up and slightly modifying whatever creature produced it. Okay, that's a normal process, but there are obvious limits in that process. Obvious limits. So you can look at those similarities, but that's not enough because there are too many differences. You're not going to classify them in the same animal or say that we evolved from them. That's just crazy. All right, next page, which is, I think that's this is it right here. Hominids. Oh my. About 4 million to 6 million years ago, human-like primates appeared. They were different from the other primates. These ancestors, called hominids, ate both meat and plants, walked upright on two legs. They shared characteristics with gorillas, orangutans, chimpanzees, but a larger brain separated them from the apes. And they have an example of this, a fossil remains of Lucy, estimated to 2.9 to 3.4 million years old. Oh man. Humans and apes, despite what many people are not taught because of that propaganda thing we talked about, humans and apes are found together often in the same rock layers. In fact, you look at the geologic column, they're on that top layer together. It's where all the mammals are. So that's where you're going to find humans and apes, and you could find them together. That wouldn't be a surprise because they live together. I mean, if the humans evolved from the apes, there's still going to be apes around that didn't evolve into humans, so you're going to find them in the same layer of strata. And if that happens, there could be some mix-up because of the similarities in the skeletal system. It would be easy to misidentify one for the other, which is why you have the old examples of the hoaxes, and the misidentifications like Piltdown Man, where you took a cranium of an orangutan, I believe it was, in the jaw of a human, or vice versa, and mixed them together. So total forgery, known to be a forgery, and that's because there's just similarities and you're misidentifying it. And you can look at the Nebraska Man, which was two ape creatures, actually a man and his wife, constructed from a single tooth. It has similarities with a human tooth, so they believed that it was a human or like an ape-human hybrid, when it turns out that it evolved from a species of pig known as peccary. So the real Nebraska Man was a damn pig. It's not, That would be pretty good, though, if you could just construct a man and his wife just using a single tooth. I mean, damn. Sherlock Holmes, eat your heart out, my friend. That's pretty good, but it didn't happen. It's just a pig. Misidentifying a cranium as ape or human is easy to avoid when you just know at least 3 exclusive cranium features that can be identified. I mean, if you want, show me any of these so-called hominids, or they're supposed to be like humans evolving from apes, like Lucy. Show me a Lucy skeleton. You don't even really have one. I mean, all this shit. That's the first thing that we should probably talk about, because the Lucy fossil down there, I mean, look how much of it is even there. It's not even nothing. If you could compile all of the so-called ape-human hybrid fossils that there is, they'd fit in the back of a pickup truck. They wouldn't even overflow it. So it's, I don't know, it's minimum compared to, you look at the whole fossil record, there's like less than 1% of the entire fossil record that even consists of mammals in general. Okay, like 90%, over 90% of the entire fossil record is just marine invertebrates. Okay, they don't even have a backbone. They live in the ocean. That's most of the fossil record. Clams, and more clams. That's all it is. Okay, they just misrepresent it on their graph to make it look like they evolved. They show the more impressive, bigger animals at the top, but it's skewed, okay, severely, just to make it look like they evolved. That's another topic. Let's get back to Lucy. She's supposed to be 3 million years old, based on the radioactive dates. She's supposed to be a human-ape hybrid of some sort, and that's just based on certain similarities within the skeletal structure. But you could, like I said, if you could take any of these so-called hominid creatures, you show them to me, and I will tell you. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know. Okay, I'm just like a normal. I have no degrees in anything to do with the skeleton, but just me, I would be able to tell you if that is an ape or a human. You could show me any skull, and I would be able to tell you if it is a human or an ape because there are just obvious exclusive features to the creature. So you take the cranium features, okay, like the forehead. Apes don't even have forehead. They go from the brow ridge, boom, straight to the top. It just goes back. Okay, it's very narrow there. It is pronounced significantly on a human. The humans have a nose bone. Okay, if you take your finger, and you kind of smash it up there, man, there's a bone in there somewhere. I can't remember. Oh, yeah, right here. Okay, you push up. There's like a little knob. Okay, you're going to encounter a boundary. You push your nose up like that. That's called a nose bone, which apes don't have and humans do have. And then there's the canine teeth or fangs that is present in the apes, and it's not present in the humans. So if you look at any of these so-called fossils, you look at that Lucy fossil or whatever they're claiming, if it doesn't have a forehead, and it's got to have all three, but it's going to be available. All of the three are going to be present in whatever you're digging up. I guarantee you this. If you're looking at an ape, it's going to have no forehead. It's not going to have a nose bone, and it's going to have fangs. And if it has all three of those qualities, those traits, it is in fact an ape. Now, if you're looking at the skull, you don't know. Maybe, I don't know. That looks kind of like a weird skull. Maybe it did. Maybe it is some kind of monkey human. Man, it looks like a real skull. If it has a forehead, it has a nose bone, and it doesn't have canine teeth, it is a human. And we're overlooking other features that you could identify just in the cranium, the brain capacity, the brain case, rather, of the skull is much bigger in humans. Humans don't have googly eyes. They're actually like kind of oval or whatever the shape that they give them, but it's not like super googly and super round, perfectly spherical like the ape eyes. And then there's a in between the mandible, I guess, and the cranium, in the temple, that indention there, where the brow ridge is, it is very pronounced in apes. So you could look at multiple features and be able to tell if it is a primate or a human. It is not that hard. It would be hard if you're just completely overlooking those differences. It would be pretty easy if you had a propaganda machine, a taxpayer's GoFundMe account to teach the children they share a common heritage with an earthworm based on the similarities in the DNA and structure of apes and gorillas. Oh, well, they're similar, therefore they're the same thing. You don't even know what you're talking about. You can't see the forest for the trees. It's not happening with them. They're not real scientists. What is this next page? This will be the last page here. 171, 172. Oh, man. All right. Early humans in the 1960s in the region of Africa, hominid fossil, which was more like present-day humans than Australopithecus, was discovered. Hominid named Homo habilis, which is 1.5 million to 2 million years. So the Lucy fossil is like 3 million, basically. And they're saying this is like 1 million. So 1 million years after you get Lucy, you get that body shape. You add another 1 million years. Okay, and that's how evolution works, by the way. If thousands of years won't work, you just go get yourself millions of years. And if that don't work, you just add billions of years and keep adding time until the people believe it and make sure that they don't hear anything that contradicts the theory. And that's how control in the media works. We don't have freedom of the press, folks. It was gone, bought, and purchased by what is known as the Illuminati. You can call me a conspiracist if you want. That's the damn truth, you know. And the devil is a real person that exists in the hearts and minds of many individuals. Otherwise, why would you believe that you came from a rock? Are you that insane? You could not even be that dumb on your own. You'd have to have help and go to school for years and years to believe something like that. Cro-Magnon humans, 400,000 years ago, Europe, Asia, Australia, dated to 10,000 years. Neanderthals, short, heavy-bodied, with thick bones, small chins, heavy brow ridges. And like I said, they're in the same layers of strata, so easy to misrepresent or misidentify. And there are 3 exclusive traits, at least, that you can identify on these early humid Homo habilis. If it has the word homo attached to it, you know, that just means human, basically. So they all have exclusive traits to the human cranium. And then when you go to things like Australopithecus, which if you look at that name, Australopithecus, you know, Southern Pithecus, ape, it's a southern ape. It's not even a human. It has exclusive traits to the ape, making it an ape. I don't care if it was bipedal and habitually walked on 2 feet or not. It is a tree-dwelling monkey. That's what it is, okay? It's the animal, you know. Gorillas do a lot of walking around on their legs. Maybe you're looking at an ape that is underdeveloped or something. Maybe you're looking at an extinct ape that was able to walk around on 2 legs habitually. You're looking at an ape. I don't care if we can find one like that today. Maybe, I mean, you can call it, if you want to, you can call it hominid. Sure, that's the name that we'll give for these bipedal primates. And I would be fine with that. You're not classified as a human. It is not a human. It's not a human. Now, that concludes Exposing Lies in Modern Science Curriculum, Part 4, Freshman General Science. If anybody wants to join in the stream, come to this box and say anything, I'll bring you in here. But for now, we'll go into an intermission, play a little music. I'll bring you in if you click that link, and if not, we will end the stream, and I'll see you tomorrow or the next day. I'm going to upload. I'm going to be doing Scientists That Destroy Evolution Theory. That'll be coming soon with Dr. David Minton. That guy's a boss. Okay, PhD in biology, makes evolution theory look like a dumpster fire rolling down a flight of stairs. It's pretty bad. It gets pretty smoky too, stinky. I don't like it, but you know, it's pretty entertaining. I don't know. I like a challenge. So he brings a pretty good challenge to the table. You know, that presents it from a critical perspective, shows everything that the opposing side believes. So I don't, and that's really the difference between us and them, the creationist and the evolutionist. I'm a creationist, and I'm willing to admit that I have a religion that's not based on science, what we can know, testing, observation, demonstration. They will not admit that. I just have a theory, I just have a religion. I do believe that it's scientifically verifiable, but that doesn't make it absolutely true. That doesn't mean that I can dogmatically teach it to like first graders in a public school. I don't think we should have public schools for that reason. If we do, there shouldn't be anything about origins taught in them. If it is, it needs to be in a religious class. You put it in a science class, that kind of puts it in a different category. And by the way, that's how you make people believe that your religion is valid, is you just slap the label of science on it. And that's what they've done. All the Darwin fishes out there. But anyways, if you want to join, click the link and I'll be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Stay in prayer. God bless America. And my name is Christopher Sylvius, signing out. Peace be multiplied.